happening today. The Phoenix City Council is expected to take on a tough topic: police accountability. Many are calling for the creation of a civilian oversight committee, and they want to discuss what exactly that would entail. Team 12's Matt Yurus is live in Phoenix right now. And Matt, there are a couple of options on the table here.
Yeah, that's right, Rachel. They've got two models, they're calling it, Model A and Model B, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. Again, I am outside City Council chambers now. Leaders have met on this very issue at least 4 or so times in the past year or so. Before we get into the plans or the ideas, I want to talk about exactly how we got here, or more specifically, how all this originated. Take a look here. This is a viral video from last year. It shows police officers pointing their guns and screaming at families whose little girl was suspected of shoplifting. One of the officers in that video has since been fired. The video sparked outrage across the nation, arguments over what entails excessive force. Back to what the city of Phoenix is considered doing about it. It really boils down to a couple of options. The first proposal, or Model A if you will, creates a civilian position. That person would mediate complaints, monitor investigations on use of force incidents, and attend community meetings. They would also release an annual report, which would include police recommendations or policy recommendations. The second proposal, or Model B, would create 2 new independent bodies. One would be made up of city staff, the other civilians. The pair would work together to gather input from the community and release annual reports. But only the city staff would have the authority to make recommendations to the chief on policy changes and disciplinary actions. The meeting to discuss all this, which would be the 5th one, comes up today at 2:30. No word exactly yet on whether or not there will be a vote to implement one of these models, so stay with 12 News for the very latest on this developing story. Live in Phoenix, Matt Yurus, Today in AZ.